Hello guys, David Vose here. Well, it's getting late already, starting to get dark here, and it's been a wonderful day. I wanted to get a video done, and I had things to do, and I haven't been able to do anything all day. And finally, I sat down here, turned this on, and I don't know what we're going to say today. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you'll listen to this video today real carefully all the way to the end, because even though I don't know exactly what I want to say, I haven't got any notes or anything. But I do want to address something. There's some things that, we've talked about a lot of this. There's a lot of history. Some of it we don't know the history, in the sense that we could find a book that says this guy was connected with this guy in some cult. I mean, there's a lot of records that are sealed. We don't know who were the Masons and who were the Master Masons. And we've got religious figures like Charles Taze Russell that you can prove was a Mason, but there's no, evidently, you can't go back and find some charter where his name was, he became a member and what day he got a higher rank or any of this stuff. They're not putting this out. They don't tell us. They say they don't have this record. There's a lot of disinformation. There's false history that we have got to deal with. Propaganda. If you want to know what in the world you can believe and what is the truth, that's a very difficult subject. For instance, if you went to a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, you would be purportedly learning with men staring you in the face, straight faced, not a sweat bead on their face, calm and as cool as a cucumber, will stare you down and say this and that is true, and this is Jehovah's organization, and we're his mouthpiece, and you must, obviously it's a delusion. So a lot of the world isn't lies. A lot of what we see in the world, it's not a lie, it's a delusion. And the difference is that a lie, I believe you might say, at least as far as English language goes or how we use it, not necessarily you could find this dictionary meaning, but just thinking about it, as we look at these words, we say the word lie, we mean that somebody purposefully lied. We say the word deceive, and we say somebody purposefully did something to deceive you, not necessarily lie, but probably including lying. But if we say that they were ignorant, and yet they had all this to say that was wrong, oh, we can't say that's a lie. It's not as bad because they didn't mean to lie. But here's the thing. They did mean to pretend that they knew something that they didn't know. Now, they may convince themselves, and this is where this comes in, where people are lying, but they're only lying to themselves. And then what they tell you, they feel is the truth because they convince themselves. And then, of course, you've got to understand the source of this deception. Ultimately, it's Satan the devil, and this is a question that we want to answer today. We've talked about, ultimately, in the universe, there is no Satan. Because Satan is, first of all, it's just a word that we'd probably have to define. But we've got a concept in English and most of the world today of a two-horned, evil-looking, Baphomet, goat-headed deity that somehow dons a pitchfork or a trident, and he's over this abyss, and he's over the dead, and he seems to be a deity of vengeance and hate. Well, if you go back and you look at the actual esoteric wisdom, the actual information that's written in the stars. It is not a religion. It is a scientific, it goes back to a scientific mathematical language. But we don't have that anymore because, as the Bible says in a symbolic way, that Yahweh confused the language. Now, if you understand what Yahweh is, it's something like this parable. You have to read the parable and pray and try to discern by letting the light and the revelations come to you. Intuition from above. So there wouldn't be any authority on what the meaning of any of this is. Because the only people in this world are people. And prayer is not something that we get answers from the Lord in the conscious mind. It never was about that. If it was a man that came up to you in the conscious physical world and told you certain things and told you what to say and what to believe, that would be a man. And if you said, well, yeah, but he said he was deity, and I believed him, now you're working on faith. You have to somehow believe that this one man is different and greater and knows more than others. You have to accept his testimony. There's nothing you can do in this physical world to get a testimony from some human being that you can absolutely be certain is from the Lord. Because even if you believe that one as a prophet, you would do so because of the omens that you were receiving from the intuition, the feelings within yourself that this is right or wrong. We can be deceived on these kinds of things. It's an art, and if one went to an artist, a spiritual grammar artist, a historical artist, a artist who is actually a teacher, then you would have to decide whether you could believe that teacher and his testimony. When people teach what they have done by experimentation and they give you the results, they're only telling you facts. This is what we did. This is the experiment. This is the results. But even then, you cannot extrapolate that there is a divine being from any of these experiments, because it's wholly and completely outside of the physical world. If it was something we could measure, we would measure it. It would be settled. It would be done. If it were, if it's like, okay, it's like this. There are many men in the world that say, we believe that if you murder somebody, then you must be stopped. And it seems to be universal. But even that, we can't be certain that it's not just an opinion. But if it is an opinion, it is based on everybody's will to decide that that is going to be our stated opinion. Why? Because we are confronted with some fact that if we let people murder, then we might be murdered. Our children might be murdered. And there's a feeling within everybody in the world that if you have something wrong done to you that you perceive to be wrong, and that everybody generally perceives to be wrong, and it's egregious and causes great pain, something physically damaging, loss of life or limb, or torture, or, things that everyone agrees. We make this rule. We don't do this. And then somebody does it. We decide collectively that that's a wrong. We can call it a sin, but, people will say, well, now, sin in the Bible is transgression of the law of Moses. Well, that was one type of don't do that. There was a rule that the world had. It was a don't do, and it was based on a story that there was a man named Moses who is one of the olive branches that it's in the Apocrypha. There are two olive branches. One was a greater anointing there were two trees, and one was greater, and there was a lesser tree. And the lesser tree was Moses, and the greater tree was Elijah. And it is a system of knowledge that's handed down from some ancient source. Now, if we just assume that some ancient source is divinely inspired and it is true, and we're going to follow it, we would have to have a lot of confirmation. We'd have to have a lot of proof and evidence to make that a standard belief that everybody's got to accept it. The only way one can ever establish the kingdom of the Lord and the knowledge of the Lord shall go forth and every eye will see it is when it can be demonstrated. When you offer people happiness and say, if you do what I say, we'll have happiness. If you don't do what I say, you'll get great pain. They will be compelled to follow you because pain is universally hated. Until there is a prophet who can bring fire down from heaven and raise the dead, that's the only reason we believe Christianity, because Jesus did the miracles. He proved he was the Son of Deity. He even fulfilled the scriptures. Now, some of it's subjective. I agree. And now we've got a book that purports to be 2,000 years old, back to Christ, and we're having to not just believe his words and the testimony that he healed people and was the Son of Deity, but we do have with our own eyes the ability to look at the Old Testament prophecies and see if he might have fulfilled it in our imaginations. But again, we have to accept others who have come before us, who have said that these books are this old, this, we have to accept maybe archaeologists, we have to accept some testimony of some people. Now, we don't just do it willy-nilly. There might need to be corroboration that this man knew that man, and there was a chain of, there were affidavits, there were written records. We have some reason we believe all of this. And it would be impossible to sit down and prove why the majority of the wise men in the world believe this way or the other way. If we wanted to say, look, I ain't accepting anybody's opinion, I don't care how old they were or how smart they were, because I don't trust them, I think they're all liars, then you'd have to completely start over again and get all the information on your own, and you probably couldn't even do that. So we have lots of glitter, lots of little things that might indicate that we can trust the basic history that we know. Like, I know that my dad is a real person. I knew him, spoke with him, and I know what my dad believed about his childhood and his father. And he could tell me stories about his father, my grandpa, and there was no indication where at all, any inclination that my grandpa believed in a different world or didn't accept the prevailing opinions of their day. He assumed that there was 2,000 years from Christ. We can find books, hundreds and maybe thousands of people who wrote 200 or 300 years ago. We still have their writings. And we can pour through them, and all of them assume, none of them, very few of any of these ancient writers or clear back to Newton, deny that Jerusalem wasn't a city in ancient times and that the basic dates. In fact, Newton did a whole chronology. Ussher, a scholar named Ussher, did a chronology and said that Adam lived 4,000 BC. Multiple scholars since him and before him have all added up all the numbers in Genesis and come up with similar, very closely parallel thoughts. But none of them deny that there weren't ancient countries like Israel and Samaria and Babylon, and that there weren't kings, and that Plato didn't talk about democracy, and that Aristotle didn't study philosophy. I mean, it gets deep because we can even look at the Greek words, and we can find pages that were dug up underground, and many scholars can date with various means, generally or loosely. They can say, we think this was 100 years BC or something. And there are reasons for it. They might have been talking about certain things that you would not have known if you lived before that time, and it never existed, right? And if quite a few different people that claim to have been of certain time, BC, talk about certain things, and they didn't know each other from different countries, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles apart, and yet they verify, it's like we've got all this evidence that's so deep that some YouTuber that's sitting down in his basement declares himself the Sons of God Ministries or something, can just sit down and figure all this out and decide, oh, it's all crap. They lied. A lot of the people that nowadays are trying to say that we're missing 1,000 years of history, or maybe there wasn't any history or something. But a lot of them will say it's probably the last 1,000 years that's been made up. It didn't exist. There's only been 1,000 years since Christ or something like that. Well, I can verify that we have a Rubik's Cube with about 1 million sides and 1 million boxes on each side that can be turned in any variety of moves that will continue to keep it in chaos. It will not be in the exact spot where all the colors match on all the millions of sides. And it would be so difficult. We're talking about the universe and all of its possibilities, that there is a truth and there is a way to put it together, but no one could do it by conscious memory. It would only be done by the unfolding of truth. I can tell you that even though I cannot evaluate all the different facets of life and put them all together and have absolute knowledge of all things, we can, however, solve a Rubik's Cube with 6 sides. I've done it. I solved it. And for a long time, I used to put them together real quickly. But I haven't had one in a long time. I probably forgot how to do it now. But I can see the Rubik's Cube all over the place. Just in separate, you just separate different aspects and parts of all the knowledge we're looking at into like different Rubik's Cubes, and not put them, I won't have to figure out all the facets of life, but just this one smaller aspect. Let's talk about history then. I have heard the individuals that created certain cults and religions. I can go back to Newton. I know what he did and what he said. That's 1500. I know who became before him, the Copernicus and the Galileo and all of these individuals. I've read the stories. I remember hearing about it in school. And each of them built on each other and quoted their predecessors. I guarantee there was history from the days of Jesus to now that makes 2,000 years. Even though I haven't literally verified every year and every month and every day and everything that happened. But I have enough evidence to see that it is an absolute fact. Human beings don't necessarily lie. As we said before, they more or less deceive themselves and begin to go out on a limb, even though in many cases that limb breaks because they misjudged. Right? They wanted to be powerful. So we have these religions that take and divide the church, divide knowledge, separate men from other men by anathemas and hate and unforgiveness and deception. But even them start with the premise that we are humans and that there has been thousands of years of history. And, you've got the empiricists and the rationalists. Well, they don't agree, but they all agree about history. One group may think that those that you idolize were deceived because there's another group that had a different idea. And I'll tell you, there are two groups in the world that has, in different times and different, places in history, we've had always two groups, but they would call them different things. I think today we'll call them rationalists and empiricists. At least the academic world. I wouldn't call myself either of those things. But the only thing you could call someone like myself is simply a student of the Holy Spirit and of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's all that I can be called, because I only listen to the little lights that flash in and on and off in my mind. I have a big slate with a lot of writing all over it. I can't trust everybody unless I listen to a lot of stuff and start getting the idea that these people are all saying the same thing, and this has got to be this, and this has got to be that, and we've got witnesses and affidavits, which is why we have a Bible. This is why we claim we believe in it. We call them letters, but they're literally testifiers. That's what this whole covenant thing is. You have a covenant, and then you have a tester who certainly puts the covenant into effect and then becomes the avenger. Because a covenant is like a vow. And if you don't keep the vow, you get punished. And you have to have a punisher or it's not worth anything. And then you have to have those that are like kings have documents. They're important. They have to be kept secret, or they have to be sealed so they don't get corrupted. So this is why people have records in meetings, so that they don't just claim any willy-nilly thing. It could be gone back, and you can look at the words that were spoken in the meeting and verify if those words were actually spoken. So we have this entire system to verify everything. But when you come along and you're in the latter days and you see that there are institutions that have been so deceived that they're now idolaters. This is what the Bible called them. And today we understand we should probably drop that word and understand what we're really talking about here. They are those who saw writings, parables, and stories that were designed by the artist, the teacher, to not to veil the truth, but to unveil the truth. Because only can you learn by understanding, and understanding comes from pictures more than it does from just letters and symbols that you have to interpret. So to interpret words, the best way to interpret them is to make them in pictures so that you can understand in yourself, and you can say, I know what the meaning of it is, because this is a painting. I'm going to describe and explain what this word is in a picture. And this is why we use visions. If human beings can close their eyes and thoughts come into their mind, and we notice that some of the thoughts that come into our mind are hateful and vengeful and anxious, jealous, and all these kinds of negative things that we've determined are negative. And we want to indulge in them, but we find that if we do indulge in them, it makes our life miserable. But it may be that we are not even aware of that. So people can have knowledge or believe something based on that kind of thing that's going on. That's probably the reason why people have different opinions. Because grown-ups have the opinion that everything's going to be all right, and we're going to take care of each other, and we've got to be responsible. And if something like pain happens, they don't fall apart. They go to their experiences in life and gather from that and get wisdom. And they notice that others in the past have had this same wisdom and have written poetry. And it just all fits together for somebody, but it's a long process. And ultimately, it's a matter of being able to discern. We have to have the ability to discern. And we have to have a lot of information to be able to go through a garbage dump and know, like, if somebody threw you in a garbage dump and said, pick out all the good stuff and throw all the bad stuff away. Well, if you didn't have any idea about the last 100 years in our history and what a washing machine was, or an old couch, or what they were used for, you would find things and you wouldn't know what they were used for. How would you know if they're useful? So it takes knowledge to know whether anything is useful. So my teacher told me, finding the truth is like going through a garbage dump. You go to a garbage dump and you notice that there's some precious thing in there. Maybe there's a diamond lying in the mud, a pearl, or a Rolex watch that somehow got thrown away or is in the garbage. Well, you recognize that value and you take it, and even if it's dirty, you clean it off and you keep it. But you have to be smart enough to understand that there's going to be very few good things in there. Most of it is just garbage, and you don't want to touch it. It's dirty, it's filthy, there's no value in it. So in life, there's a hodgepodge of ideas. We've got to be smart enough to realize that there's a lot of it that is just the base knowledge that everybody accepts, including even Satanists, including the most vile people in all the world. They themselves believe that walls are solid and you bump into them and you could, cut yourself or bruise yourself. They follow much the same rules as we, but they have determined that this great big problem that we have in this world, to find peace, the problem that we have to get rid of all the suffering, they have determined that it is a condition of the human heart, even as the good people have determined the same point. But the good people, or the ones who are on the right path, and there is only one path, I don't mean the right or the left or the middle. If anybody, I told this to somebody the other day, if anybody ever tells you that there's a middle path, or a left or a right path, and they know which path to take, and that others take a different path and everybody can take their own path, they're lying to you. Because there's only one path. There's only the right path and the wrong path. There is no other. So, people like Aleister Crowley made up this thing where, and they were broke from the original esoteric believers, from the ancient ones who knew this truth, that built line upon line, facts built upon facts, evidence that led way to more evidence, and respecting your elders and those who came before you, and then advancing their theories and studying it deeper and making improvements and all of this until we come to this day. But then why would it have messed up? With a human mind, we could have figured everything out. Well, today we've got Elon Musk that's trying to get everybody's minds into an AI, and that's going to be the sum total of all of our will, and we're going to create something, utopia? Well, why didn't we do that before? And did we really need a computer to do it? We've all got minds, and we've got books, and we have society, and we make the laws, and we have democracy. Why didn't we build a system by now that was the New Jerusalem with crystal walls and pearly gates. Because something crept in. It was a desire from the lower realm to excuse behaviors and tell other people they can't do it, but we get away with it because we're being hypocrites. Now, where would that have come from? Well, it comes from the fact that it can't be somebody's choice. Oh, that's what they made the choice. They're going to hell now, right? They're evil. They're all the same. We're all children. Every puppy comes out the same playing, and they're not evil dogs. There's abused dogs, but we're all the same. But there are young and there are older dogs. The older ones know more. And there are older souls, mature. And for whatever reason, there are some people that are more mature. There's some people that are likely to fall apart and have a tantrum rather than be calm and know what to do. So we have to deal with this. And it's a phenomenon that makes no sense because the world kept learning. Newton believed in the Bible. He didn't just throw everything out, but he also studied the Emerald Tablets. He wasn't a fool. The only reason why people today, like Christians, don't study the Emerald Tablets is because organizations came along that began to teach that you shouldn't. Newton was a Christian. All of France were Cathars, Gnostics, and they believed in all the Holy Scriptures. What happened to them? This is what I want to talk about. There was a conspiracy. They were murdered, all of them. But who could have done that? Well, the Bible says that it would happen. And we could study and think and talk and theorize as to why it happened. And I will just tell you briefly that there is a lower ego that's selfish, that is part of nature when you don't have humans, which humans embody love and wisdom, and they are the ruler, they are the king, they have dominion over the animals. The animals were made to be followers of the man, and he was to have dominion. When man no longer had dominion, the animals are like children playing in the street. You can't blame them. Society, ecology, everything in the universe, institutions that teach lies or obscure, all comes from the same reason, that there is a lower ego and individuals make money off of keeping you ignorant. Now, there was a group of individuals that were on the earth from the days of Jesus all the way down to, I would say, well, even today. But they were more organized all the way up until probably, 1500 or something. It got pretty undefinable by that time as to whether there was a source for the truth or whether everybody was just making it up. Because of greed and whatever reasons that sin enters into the world. People burning books and, anathemas and people having power and greed and following their lower, maybe making excuses for their affairs or whatever they might have done and making new laws that protect and harbor in, pedophiles or whatever that the world did that made it easier for a group of criminals that already thought their soul was lost and might have justified their robbing and pillaging because they were going to give it to the poor or something. This got to a point where there were certain individuals that weren't wise, hadn't come to a place of maturity in Christ, due to a lot of these problems that we've been talking about. Innocent problems, some of them. Natural, happenings that just happen through life when disasters occur and people get lost. Not everybody's going to know everything. But if you've got somebody that knows nothing about the spiritual things and sees the world in such confusion and then becomes angry and doesn't know the answer why these things are happening, and then maybe he's abused or mistreated by society, that person might fall into a thing we might call insanity, or bitter, vengeful, and wanting vengeance on society, may not even care anymore because he feels like you're not a part of his tribe, that you tried to kill him. So now somehow, because mankind believed in this eye for an eye thing, and this got into the heart of man, and it defiled us, this guilt, this eventually got to a place where somebody became very powerful based on his vengeance and greed and anger over what he felt was an injustice. Somehow this is what happened. So, obviously, we look around in the world today and we see a lot of evil. Terrible, evil things. Some of the things that's about to happen, like just say the word depopulation. Well, that's a nice way of saying you're going to kill everybody. Can you imagine? We just say that with a straight face, that we've come to the place where we're talking about the concept that there might be somebody in the world, a group of individuals that have a lot of power, that have decided to depopulate the world. They may have decided that there's no way to fix society. There's just too many of us. And that we're too ignorant. And they no longer have any faith in the coming of Christ and his kingdom. And Jesus prophesied this. And they're going to take it upon themselves. Maybe they get together, they get a council, and they start just scratching everything, just like people in their basements are doing now on YouTube, saying we don't believe in anything. Maybe they don't believe in anything either. Maybe they did the same thing. They say, we don't believe in the Bible. He ain't coming. We don't believe in the Lord. We don't, we're rationalists. We're going to rationalize everything. We don't need empirical evidence. Newton was an empiricist. There were many people that were all good people, good scientists, that believed in, certain books like the Bhagavad Gita, but not as Christians. And they were smart, they were just men, they were good men, they were clever, and they were smart. And we as Christians acknowledge that Newton was smart. How could he know physics, Newtonian physics, all the stuff that he made that we use today, we can attest is almost got to be accurate. The man knew stuff. I mean, I don't know calculus. I don't practice that. And I know it takes a lot of learning to use that kind of science and math. But I feel that it's a tool that I don't need because I'm not building satellites that, I'm not into those fields. I'm not trying to build atomic weapons or even skyscrapers that, will withstand earthquakes or whatever reasons they may need this physics. It hasn't been something that I needed to learn. I'm aware, though, even though I don't know to do it myself, I don't know how to do highly complex calculus. But I know, and I'm relatively sure, that it is a science that is true and it works. Even though I haven't gone through every little aspect of it to prove that it's actually a tool that can be used and it's correct and it makes sense. I guess I just assume, 1 and 1 is 2, and they say I learned it from them, and they taught me when I was a little baby how to my ABCs and stuff. I accepted that they knew something, they were teaching me something. If there was, if the only thing that the evil, whoever the evil is in this world, or whatever evil is in this world, must be something. They're trying to murder us all. What is that? Just deception, ignorance, or are they evil? Well, whoever these evil people are, and for whatever reason that they became evil, they still go by 2 and 2 is 4. So, what has caused this breach? What has caused this problem? Could it be as simple as we had a whole house full of dogs that are not potty trained, nobody cared, nobody spent any love and time with them? We didn't want to take care of them, so we didn't feed them. We starved them. We murdered, we kicked them. We did everything. And they got vicious. And you couldn't even enter the house. They'd bite you. They'd attack you. And so you think, well, the only solution now is go in there and exterminate them all. Start over again. What would be their motive then in making and breeding more dogs? This time to have a plan and teach them correctly? Well, what if their plan is to have a whole group of dogs that they're going to breed in a new generation of dogs, but that they're going to breed them for vicious hunting purposes, and they're going to use these dogs as, soldiers in a dog army, and they're going to manipulate their genes and make them vicious to the point where they would be devoid of any kind of love or cuddliness. And all they were going to do, this new breed of dogs, is guard the elite and protect them from anyone taking their stuff and giving them power and fame and wealth. What if they decided to use mankind as a machine or a computer to make them smart enough to literally defy God? What if they're doing it on purpose? What if they think, and they know the truth, that what God is, or this divine being, is the divine mind, which is the logic, which for thousands of years all the wise understood and knew, but that they have decided was an error. We've tried this for thousands of years. They've given up on it. They think, oh, Christ isn't coming. Let's beat our fellow servants. Let's eat and drink with the drunkards. My master delayed this coming. This is what Jesus said would happen. He gave talents to one person. They went out and made more. He gave talents to another person. They made more. And he said, good and faithful steward, when I return. But to some, he gives them talents and they go bury it in the dirt or they waste it. They were slothful. What does it mean? It means the talents of love, the talents of making a better world. Many people in the world today have squandered their talents. And it's an interesting word because it means coins or money or valuable or the domestic value of things. But it's also, today we use it for the idea of if you're talented, you can play the guitar or sing or make poetry, or you have a talent of jumping far or something. Well, in a sense, that is the word. Words never lie. I just was watching a video earlier today. It was a video, I don't know where it came. I think somebody sent it to me. But the guy's name is Travis. And I only watched one video of his. I think I'm part of another one because I was intrigued. He has a really big heart, and I think he's really sincere. And he feels led, and he says he's called. And I kind of feel like he might think he's Elijah. But I do know that he probably feels like he's a prophet. And after listening to him, I actually think that he's right. I think the Lord has called him. And I think he's one of the, I don't know if that he's Elijah. I don't know at this moment. I haven't even watched more than like one or one and a half of his videos. But just watching that one video and hearing his message, I really believe that he has been called of the Lord. And the Lord has raised him up to talk some common sense into some people at this time when we're about to go through the Great Tribulation. And he said he did some research on his name, Travis. He was born that. And he has a whole story about why he was born that and everything. And he said that it means something about traveling. Travis, travel. And he gave some interesting points about the word. You could say travel just means somebody who travels. Because he also mentioned that originally the word was Tramples. And now they changed it to Travis. Well, interesting. It's just when you go from one country or language to another, you change the spelling. Tramp is also a word that means a traveler, a tramp. But it doesn't just mean a traveler. It's a specific kind of traveler. Someone that's at the crossroads. Someone who traveled all the roads and knows which way to go. And he would stand at the crossroads and tell you, when you got there, which way you would be best for you to go. You might say a knower, a seer. And that a tramp was not just somebody who traveled around, but somebody who set traps. Now, I don't know whether he set good traps or bad traps, this original tramp, or this occupation of being a tramp. But why would anybody have an occupation of traveling the world and standing on the corner setting traps for others? Well, you might have people that would do that if, indeed, they were trying to steer everybody away from prosperity so that they could, maybe out of vengeance because they hate you because of some misunderstanding, or maybe some real understanding that you had hurt them and they want eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This is the only reason. But there are people in the world that have good hearts and they're seeking the Lord. And that's all it takes. And if you seek the Lord as hard as that man has sought the Lord, you can see it in the energy that he portrays, his words and the things he's thought about. The Lord has given him great wisdom. And I think his YouTube channel is No Longer Lost or something. But his name is Travis. He's got a growing channel. And I think there's a lot of value in the things he's saying. But when I look at the world today and I see all the things that people are doing, an important part of figuring this all out is, why are they doing it? We want to know, why is there an enemy? Who's the devil and what's he up to? You know, it's such a shock when your best friend smacks you across the face and robs you and leaves you for dead. Wouldn't that be a shock? And people go through these kinds of things. They be married for 20 years to somebody. And all of a sudden, one day, they just turn around and walk out and take your house and leave you penniless and spread rumors about you. And you're just shocked. And you either do one of two things. You get revenge, but it doesn't make things better. It just makes you more miserable. Or you turn the other cheek and you understand that they're lost right now. You give them grace. But it takes a lot of maturity, doesn't it? So this is the reason the world's in this situation, is that it takes maturity, and maturity takes growth, takes building strength. And building strength can happen if we do it on a regular basis. We exercise. But if we get lazy, it can get overwhelming. If you sat in a chair and ate nothing but pizza and cookies and donuts and candies and soda pops all day long and just smoked and drank, and you might be 30 years old sitting in a lazy boy in the living room, and you're 500-600 pounds, and it might be that somebody would say, why don't you lose some weight and why don't you change your life and go traveling and build you a family and get married and have kids. So I've given up all of that for these Twinkies. I've given up all of my hopes and dreams. No woman would want you now. You're 600 pounds. You can't get the things that you dreamed of. So you just give up on all of it because it becomes too hard. You can't imagine in your mind how you could get from 600 pounds back down to 200 pounds. And probably also because no one ever loved you and cared for you and and held your hand and was there for you and encouraged you, built you up and strengthened you. But perhaps because of this world we live in, it's become so evil that now it's collapsing around us. We feel as though it's impossible. And there's so many people that are just so weak and tired that they've given up. They don't know if there's any truth or hope in the world. And I want to tell you that there is, and there's a plan, and we're in a classroom, and this is it. We can give up. We can give in to the doubt. It's easy to have doubt. Why would I want to believe that there's anything good in the world? Why don't I just give up and die? Well, because there's an incentive not to do that, number one. It's built in, and we ignored it over the years until we finally, it got so weak we didn't hear it anymore. It's like the Bible says it's like our conscience is branded with a hot iron. It's seared. We no longer feel the connection to that knowledge of, oh, that's the wrong path. Better get up and get to work. Better do what I got to do today. Get organized, get things done so that I don't fall behind. Well, why should we have to live in a world where we might fall behind, where we've got anxiousness and we got to keep, no, it shouldn't be like that. The world's imbalanced now. Originally the world was balanced, but now it's not balanced. It's to the point where the wicked just were wicked a little bit, and then it got worse and worse and worse until now the weight of this evil is so, the Bible explains it this way, that the cries of men are so loud at this point that they're ascending up to the Lord in heaven, and it's finally reached his ears to where he cannot ignore it any longer. And he said, angels, you're going to have to go down there and do something. These humans need relief. And the only thing we can do to relieve them is because they cannot relieve themselves, because they've gotten so perverted. They've lost all hope of being able to succeed. They've given up. They're swallowed up in depression, hate, and they want revenge. And they're beyond encouragement now. It's like this little bubble, this thought form that we're believing and manifesting all around us is now to the point where it's got to be popped. We've got to take down the veil. It's going to be a shock. They're going to suffer great loss. They're going to suffer the loss of all that they think is so important, all their Twinkies. They're going to lose all their soda pops. They're going to be forced out of their lazy boy chair and no more television, and they're just going to be just themselves, free of all of that. And it's going to be a crisis. They're going to have to face the fact that the problem lies within them, that it was just a matter of they were being deceived. It was a loving thing to wake them up, but it would be a shocking thing for them too, yes. But it's come down to this. This is the day of judgment. This is the day of also reconciliation. But that's why there's all these problems in the world. But I want to parse this a little further. You've heard me talk about Jehovah's Witnesses. They're a little organization that there may be lots of sincere people in the organization, just like in most organizations. Many, many sincere people. They're delusioned into believing this is true, even to the point where they would throw their children away or murder their own children, or whatever they got to do because they believe it's the truth. They're so deceived, they've got to wake up now. And if you go back and you follow, and you're trying to figure out, well, who are these people? Where did they come from? Why did this happen? We can go all the way back to Christ and start from there. Jesus came to a group of individuals. They were the bad guys. There were no other bad guys. They were Pharisees. They were lawyers. They thought they were righteous. They thought they were the truth. But they weren't the truth. They were just the law. Moses gave the law, but Jesus said, I give the truth. So the truth is not the law. You're deceived. But they believed it. It was a philosophy that was sort of built up and encouraged and made impermeable because of constant repetition and groups and the good old boys societies and hey, we're really enjoying this way we believe, right? We've got our women thinking that they got to do everything we say, and because we're afraid that because we don't have love, because we didn't love them, they might leave us. So we make a law they can't leave us. So this is how we fixed it. And now because we are incapable of having love now, and we've denied true justice, now we stick to the former, which is discipline in a brutal way, and vengeance and even capital punishment, just to keep the norms so that the ruling class can stay in power. And that's what it is. But I want to go, and it looks like now we're at 50 some minutes, and I obviously I wouldn't have time to go into the history, which is what I want to do, and I'm going to probably do that tomorrow. But I want to tell you the history that you've never heard before. But it's all there, and I can prove all of it to you without even giving you quotes or chapter and verse. I mean, we might give some chapter and verse, but some of it's historical. We need cross-referencing certain historical documents and other things that I'm not going to give you. We don't have much time. It would be my hour video with all those references would take weeks writing, and I don't use notes. I don't go and look at the book and get the quote. All that I'm telling you is what comes to me as I sit here and talk to you, based on the fact that I have some understanding that I want to share with you. And I have some facts that the Lord has shared with me, some wisdom that the Lord has given me that I want to share with you, so that when you see it, you won't need references. You'll say, oh, most of that stuff, I get what you're saying. I know that's pretty general. But it's just that if you don't know what was going on, you would probably miss a few things. Just like Jehovah's Witnesses might think they're right, but they're missing so much that they don't realize they're deceived. So sometimes it takes the only way you can really enlighten somebody else or the world or anyone is either you tell them a bunch of stuff that's lies, but you prove it to them through references that are, it's kind of like magic. It's kind of like sleight of hand. You make it look like they've got to believe this because so-and-so believed it, and therefore in this and such, but it may be a false, twisted bunch of evidence. It may be rationalism instead of empiricism. We may be rationalizing so many things and sneaking some lies behind, innuendos and false testimonies that you didn't catch. Or you can just know the truth. When you know the truth, it's like saying somebody says that there's a tree out there and there's a stream down by the base of the cliff, and you can get some clean water, and you can there's fruit growing all over the place, and it's a beautiful place because they've seen it. Right? They know it, and they're just giving you their testimony. They didn't have to learn it. They actually know it by experience. They saw it, right? Now there's another person that never seen any of it, but he's gone and gotten some evidence, and he's interviewed some of the liars that are just angry because they don't believe that there's really water over there, and they're too lazy to go check, or maybe they have an ulterior motive. They want you to die of thirst, or. But the thing of it is, they don't know. And they're using some other system of knowing, which isn't knowing. It's just theories and stuff. And they're in their pride. They may have some ulterior motive, but in their pride, they've accepted it. You have a choice. You can listen to all their gobbledygook and accept all that they're saying to you based on what they put together. Or you can find several witnesses, eyewitnesses. And if that person said, yeah, there is water over there, and you said, well, what's the water taste like? And, is it clear? And are there plants? And, and they'll describe everything to you. And then when another person comes along and describes the same thing, then you know that they couldn't be lying. That's how we're going to have to figure this out. We're going to have to go to the Lord. But the only way we're going to even know that the Lord's there, because it's something that's within you. And it takes the ability to realize that you need to go in that direction to find the Lord. And if somebody else didn't know about that direction, they wouldn't tell you that. They'd be giving you on a wild goose chase. But if you ever find somebody that's been there and they're telling you their testimony, and it's like a bell that you ring, and everybody that hears the bell for miles around know that that's the bell for dinner. They don't have to be proving it. They can hear it. So I don't know if you've ever heard about there's a ring of truth. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be a counterfeit bell. But what we do know is we're saying we hear a bell ringing. And we know that that's a bell. And we don't, or if somebody plays a song and it's beautiful, you don't need to prove that it's beautiful. You don't need to write an article and give evidence why the music was beautiful. The people who hear it give their testimony that it's beautiful. They know it is. Truth is like that melody. It's like a rainbow. You know that it's delightful. When you see flowers, they're beautiful. You don't need to know if it's truly a good thing. Are flowers good, Dave? I don't know. Maybe they're not. You can start thinking maybe flowers are deceptive little things and they might kill you. They're poison. You just know that water and that cool brook draws you. Yeah, there may be a brothel down the road where everybody's drinking whiskey and they're saying, look, come this way. Forget the water and all the good food and the healthy calmness around this environment and paradise. But let's go down here to the slum where you could get robbed, where there's thieves behind every door, and somebody's trying to get money and they're selling a human being for sex. And then they're going to take the money and go buy drugs. And it's the drugs that they're getting are chemicals that are poisons that are keeping them in a serious medical condition that they can't even get out of because they're so addicted to this. And it's this really, it's a situation that anyone would be able to see is not good. But the only reason why people would go that direction is because they've thrown up their hands and, as my aunt used to say, they're sowing their oats, or they're throwing their cares into the wind, or they're just pursuing folly for the pleasure of it, ignoring the glaring truth or the gorilla in the room. That's not a sustainable life. People are dying. But many of them don't care because they're selling their soul for that pleasure. But don't make excuses. And if you're searching for the truth, then don't worry about what those people are doing. Maybe they have sold their soul for that pleasure. But you know, because you don't, and you haven't sold your soul, that the truth does appeal to you. And you can find the truth. We don't have to deny all of history. And I'm going to take history tomorrow, and we're going to go through it. I'm going to find out who's running the world and why they're here and who they are. We're going to talk about Samuel Mathers. We're going to talk about Little. We're going to talk about Aleister Crowley. Rudolf Steiner. Madame Blavatsky. We're going to talk about Charles Taze Russell. We're going to talk about Brigham Young. We're going to talk about the Masons. We're going to talk about the Golden Dawn. We're going to show the proof and the evidence that when the Golden Dawn disappeared, several different organizations popped up that were reorganized versions of it. So these occult societies had magazines like the Golden Dawn, and maybe another magazine like the Morning Star or something. Well, then along about that time, Jehovah's Witness put a periodical magazine out, and they call it the Millennial Dawn. So they take two of the occult words and put them together. Golden Dawn, they use the word dawn. They also talk about the Golden Age. They got the winged serpent on their books. Russell's talking about being a Mason, a Freemason, a free and accepted Freemason. They meet in halls. They talk about Egyptology, and they're Zionists, and they say that Jews don't have to accept Christ, but they're the chosen race. This is what Russell taught. And he was financed by the groups who had now taken over the esoteric mystery schools. We're going to find that there was a man who was the head of the Golden Dawn. And by the way, when Brigham Young took over the Mormons, they came out with their own, what was it called? The Millennial Star, I think they called it. They all have these magazines, and they all call themselves societies. We've got the Theosophical Society, we've got the Watchtower Society, and various societies that came out. And each of these societies would have periodicals, they would have charters, they would have pamphlets, and they would have this movement, and they would recruit. But what I want to share with you by the end of tomorrow's video is not only just the source and the history of all of this, and even pointing out who may be running the world today. I don't know if you know it, but the guy that used to run Twitter that Elon Musk bought, and now Elon Musk is running around in Baphomet suits, but the guy who ran Twitter has now grown a long wizard beard. He is now the grand Supreeme Magus of the Satanic Church. And these individuals, even Elon, goes back to these particular Orthodox groups, and they have been hiding a lot of this from us, but they all go back in a line through these initiations back to the Golden Dawn, which was hijacked by Aleister Crowley. And we're going to trace this back to the beginnings and see who it is that is really responsible for these organizations and the Masons and all of this. We'll see how they infiltrated the original Knights of Mary Magdalene in Marseille, France, and how they eradicated certain groups of Christians that had truth that we've not even heard about in years. And only recently, in modern times, we even bring these individuals up, the Cathars, which were all of France. And they lived in a place in the valley. And we'll trace it down to this Earl of York, right? These kings and queens and counts of York that created the York rites of this secret society. You've heard of Francis Bacon, who was literally, and his brother was King James, and they did the King James Bible, and it was Francis Bacon as Shakespeare that was writing all this coded information, and was a poet, and was involved with this Golden Dawn at this very same moment. Well, he was involved with these occult things and tarot and different things, and was working for Queen Elizabeth. And there was quite a few at that time, John Dee and Edward Kelly, and they were doing seances. But these individuals all would meet in Bavaria for various reasons. And they all went back. Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, and King James goes back to Edward VIII. You know, Edward VIII, I am. There's a reason why Shakespeare did a video or a play about this, because Edward VIII was from York. And so they came to America after the New Franca was already here. And then Nova Scotia, which is this group that they drove out to Scotland and the Scottish Rites, and then massacred, and they had to come to America. And they were following in the York Rite, and they came here and made New York. It wasn't called New York when the Pilgrims got here. But there's a lot we'll talk about on that will show you the succession of events and put this all together for you. But this Golden Dawn then was a hijacking of certain religious practices and spiritual esoteric wisdom that came down from the knights that were protecting the Holy Grail. But then there was inquisitions to try and stamp them out, and the Jesuits was a knighted order that was used to do that, and they were trying to massacre and destroy the original knights, 1307 and stuff like this. Friday the 13th, you've heard about this. And these were the people that fled then and came to America. So we'll talk about that. And it originally could not take down the good guys, these individuals that lived in the valley down in the Languedoc. And those lineal descendants of Christ had this name of Valois, or in some of the novels they call him Percy Val. That's where we get the word valley. Valois in French, Latin, in German it was Vox. Well, it was this Henry VIII that married the French princess Valois. Now, why would he do that? Because the Vikings, or the Saxons, that lived in Bavaria, not Anglo-Saxons, but these Saxons, which were Vikings, which were the Goths, which destroyed Christianity and changed our deity Theos to Godin or God, and believed in the law and punishment and vengeance, and really were more or less Satanists. They were vile. They would murder and kill everybody. As a brotherhood, they were trying to destroy us. All the way back to Caesar, he was fighting this barbarians. And they weren't just having endless wars like we are today, but they were literally protecting themselves from these Vikings. They had the skull and bones and came and would massacre all the natives here in America. There's vast civilizations that were in Brazil and America and Mexico, but they wiped them out with Grim Reapers, people with black robes that looked like they had a little sigh, but it was really probably some kind of a air pump or some poisons they were spreading. And when these Grim Reapers would come through they looked like Catholic priests, Jesuits. The Jesuits ended up going to Bavaria and creating the Bavarian Illuminati. And this was to counter the mystery schools from Mary Magdalene, Jesus Christ and his lineage. And they were driven out. And so this is why Henry VIII up there in York, the Vikings, because they couldn't destroy the world's ideas by murdering them, that just made them grow more. So they had to intermarry and infiltrate. They infiltrated the parliament. And Nathan Rothschild from the Vlad the Impaler, which is this Saxon Viking line, they married into Queen Elizabeth's royal bloodline from Scotland, the Tudors and the Stuart line. And so there's a lot we can talk about that we'll have to go through. But there was always this try to take the occult masters and get them to follow this other path that they would try to teach them, this apostasy. And it didn't work for a long time until Satan literally gave them powers and offered them sex and orgies and everything else, and just like Epstein, and this is what this corruption that eventually took over and went down through Aleister Crowley, and we'll talk about Charles Russell. But yes, they married the Valois line, which is Pierre Valdez, Peter Waldo, Percy Vale, however it would be written in various novels and history books. But it was the lineal descendant of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. And they married it to infiltrate it and to water it down and to confuse and to get power over those individuals that line or princess ruled and had respect from the people. And then when she became queen, they're like, oh, well, it's fair then. We won't say anything. And this is how they would conquer. This is why today in politics you've got presidents that just pick a woman because they are trying to appease one aspect of society, or they got to have a black man on the ticket or something. It's not even about finding the right person or going after the truth. It's about manipulating people, sneaking in, and then once you've got control of their demographics or their people or culture or that aspect of society that you need their vote or their ignorance to, then that's how you would do it. And these individuals in about the year 1000 were called Waldenses because they were Wally or Valley people that lived in southeastern France down in the Languedoc. And the descendants of Christ owned 169 cities, towns, and villages along the Rhine, all the way to Paris. But it was around 1307 to 1310, 1313 that these individuals were finally massacred in Paris, France. And they fled to Portugal and the northwestern tip of France, Breton, and a little city called Amarica. And they left from there, fleeing the persecution, to Scotland. They went to Wales and Scotland. And this is where we get the Scottish Rite, which was from the original mystery school and the mystery teachings from the knights that were protecting the Holy Grail, the Holy Textus Receptus, and the purity of empiricism and the love of Christ and the truth. And instead of fighting, they left on ships, and the Portuguese colonized Brazil, and the Spanish colonized. They were also there was a Spanish Inquisition too, because when they drove them out of France, some of them went to Spain, Portugal, and so we ended up having another Inquisition in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But these individuals fled all over the world and created the Constitution. And so this is why you find that Madison and Jefferson were enamored with symbols that go back to this French area. Monticello and Montpellier along the Rhine. Because they were saying, we're the good guys. We're the Scottish Rite. We fled to Scotland. We came over here in Plymouth Rock and called it America. But behind us came the York Rite. right? From Edward VIII. Edward VIII, I am. There's a reason why Francis Bacon, the leader of the Golden Dawn and the creator of all of this occult and the Illuminati, there's a reason why they were always up in Bavaria. And these secret masters of the White Brotherhood would come and instruct certain ignorant fools like Aleister Crowley into indulging and just like Epstein did today, getting pictures with people doing immoral and disgusting and perverted things in order to kind of have insurance and control them. Because it was Aleister Crowley's sole purpose to bring the beast of Revelation to life. And he followed in the footsteps of John Dee and Edward Kelly, who had a seance. And these were these individuals that came from the Golden Dawn, but the Golden Dawn hadn't fully been corrupted. Mathers was involved in false ideas, but he still was trying to understand and had some concept of good. But Aleister Crowley said, no, we've got to do evil, and they wouldn't. So Mathers threw him out. But there were enough individuals in the world that eventually were lured in by Aleister Crowley, and he came to America, and along with Charles Russell and certain ones, they all had different motives, and some of them were, their own talents were being used by the others. After they died, they'd make them worshipped by their pupils, and people would be enamored by personalities and philosophies based on MK Ultra mind control and making groups and stretching out the initiation to 33 degrees so that we can get the whole world involved in these initiations. And if you don't like those, you can join Jehovah's Witnesses, where you're doing the initiations without even having a name for it. But everybody is now being initiated, whether you're just some guy sitting on the sofa watching television being initiated by the propaganda that's coming through the television. It's a worldwide initiation into Satanism. And we're going to explain it and where it came from and why it's here in tomorrow's episode. This is David Vose. I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. May the Lord bless you, and He will, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.